On a bright Monday, good hello and welcome. This is, of course, Business Edge. I'm Tolulope, Adeleru-Balogun. This is coming to you live on News Central. First, the headline. Nigeria urges states' participation in AfTA to boost the economy. We'll be getting into that and, of course, wrapping things up with NC4 to watch right here on Business Edge. Welcome to the show. And again, this is Business Edge. Let's get straight into the background of our story. Now, the Nigerian government has asked state governments across the nation to take advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement in a bid to attract investment to their states for economic productivity. This announcement came during the visit of the Secretary, National Action Committee on AfTA, Francis Anatugu, to the Director General of the Nigeria Governors Forum. And that happened over the weekend. Now, Nigeria ratified its membership to AfTA last week ahead of the December 5th deadline. To date, 30 countries have both signed and approved ratification of the AfTA agreement. Of the 55 AU member states, only Eritrea has yet to sign. The operational phase of the AfTA was subsequently launched during the 12th extraordinary session of the Assembly of the African Union in July of 2019. AfTA will be governed by 5 operational instruments: the rules of origin, the online negotiating forum, the monitoring and elimination of non-tariff barriers, a digital payments system, and the African Trade Observatory. Trading under the AfTA agreement was due to commence on the 1st of July 2020, but as a result of the COVID-19 global pandemic, this date has been postponed. It has been indicated that the new date for operation is the 1st of January 2021. Now we'll be getting into this conversation. We're expecting a guest to join us, but in the meantime, I have business correspondent for News Central, Nasir, Afolabi, Agbalaya joining me. Nasir, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So let's look at this. We've seen Nigeria finally sign the AfTA agreement after some hee-hawing, as some people might say. Signed last week, ratified, and many of us are looking forward to it. Africa's largest economy is finally on board. 30 countries have signed and ratified as well. Do we think African nations are truly ready for AfTA? Are they ready to take part? Or do we see maybe some regions being a bit more readier than others?
Well, Africa is ready for this, but just like your question, some regions are much more prepared. It's not about just being ready. You could be ready, you have the intention or you have the desire, but you don't have the infrastructure to back it up. As we know, that some regions in Africa have a stable power supply, which is a very, very important part of AfTA, because now with this power supply, they can drive the industrial sector vis-a-vis the eastern region of Africa. Now, it is an open secret that they have the best stable power supply in sub-Sahara Africa.
Okay.
So, in that regard, they have the value chain and everything to actually make this work. Now, it's not as if the other parts of Africa hasn't been doing anything. No, they have been, and there's lots of background work that has been happening over time. And right now, since many nations like Nigeria truly needs more trade, yes, everybody wants this to start yesterday, not even right now.
Okay, it's interesting you bring up Nigeria, but we know that protectionist policies are being imposed across the continent and even across the globe as well. And we have seen the complex trade relations that have brewed with Nigeria closing the border in the West African region and also leaning towards more economic nationalism and protectionism. This is an issue that will likely not be resolved in the 10 short weeks before AfTA kicks off. But do we think that AfTA will force parties to the table, especially Nigeria, Ghana? We have Niger being involved as one of the reasons that Nigeria closed the borders. Do we think this will force them to the table to address these issues? And what effect would it have on AfTA taking off if this is not addressed in the next 10 or 11 weeks? Let's give them a few extra days.
Well, first, because of the trade border doesn't mean that there's no trade. The borders are closed, yes, but with this, trade is still going on. Now, the borders were closed for a particular reason, to guard against illegal inflow of some goods into this country, particularly Nigeria, for instance. Now, since the border closure, Nigeria has recorded a real increase in the revenue, because now you have directed all imports into to come through certain ports, and it's now more regulated. So I don't see that changing. It doesn't really affect AfTA also, because now AfTA has its own framework where you have certain companies who are coming on board to handle primary logistics. No, with this, trade will move seamlessly across borders. Now, also another thing which AfTA is doing is having a certain payment system where everybody can transact business effortless and mostly online. So with this, the border closure would not really affect trade. In fact, it will even say guard against illegal movement of goods and services across the border.
Okay, so you've talked about value chain, we've talked about industries, and that's a place we have questions. We can talk about electricity being part of the issue of production and manufacturing across the continent, and some have it better than others. But let's be honest, the value chain of many industries across the continent is broken. It's not at the best. Even for some, it's not at even 50% operational basis. Now, looking at that, there are many people who have expressed concerns that this open border would actually allow an inflow of certain items that will then affect the local industries. While I know that state of origin is a major part of AfTA, it's not just about state of origin. It's also about the industries being able to compete locally and then across the border. So what's the situation? What's the conversation in regards to that and those who are worried?
Well, principally, AfTA is designed to actually help the small and medium-scale enterprise. It's not just for the big companies who have all the money, all the investment, but to actually ensure that even the company that has just 10 employees can compete favorably with the multi-million-dollar firms. So with this, there are some financial packages that are being negotiated for them to help them thrive. And also, like I mentioned earlier about the logistics that sort of being planned and being implemented in phases. So this is to ensure that everybody can actually do business wherever you are. It doesn't matter if you are in Burundi, it doesn't matter if you are in Lagos or you are in Bujumbura. So far as you've keyed up to this, you can sell your goods and services across border. Now, primarily, this will help African economies. You know, many nations really right now need to improve their trade. So with this, from the micro level, this will enhance trade when it starts. But unfortunately, like we said earlier, some nations have better value chain to actually make this effortless. For instance, internet services. It is not at the same par across the continent. Some nations have liberalized it so that everyone can come in.
And some are taxing.
Exactly. You have 2G, 3G, 4G. And of course, some are even practice experimenting with 5G.
Yeah.
Whereas you have some areas where they are still at 3G. So in that regard, you find that some are truly ready and some are moving towards establishing themselves more, where others are still, say, as far back as 10 years ago.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break in just a bit, but right before that, I want you to think about the issue of debt. Last week, we had a conversation about the debt that's being accumulated by the East African countries, and that debt has risen over the past decade. We've seen the statistics coming in from the international statistics, the debt statistics reports by the World Bank. We'll get into that conversation on debts when we come back. This is still Business Edge. Stay with us. We're still talking about AfTA right here on Business Edge. Business correspondent Nasir Afolabi Agbalaya is with me, and now we're talking about debt as it concerns AfTA. Now, the debt burden of many African nations has become alarming. Zambia, unfortunately, has defaulted, the first African country to do so in these COVID times, and analysts are afraid other countries may not be too far behind. The International Debt Statistics 2020 reports by the World Bank showed that between 2009 and 2019, countries in the East African region increased their external borrowing by nearly 4 times, from $19.9 billion to $73.8 billion. Now, could some of this debt become part of the consideration of trade deals? And what effect could debt have on AfTA taking off? Nasir, what do you think?
already this is part of the discussion. It has become a major talking point. Now, over the weekend, the G20 summit held in Saudi Arabia, it was a major talking point. The vaccine, COVID-19, and everything was on the table. In fact, one of the principal champions of this debt relief and debt forgiveness is the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. He actually literally went out and spoke to all the leaders via, so it's a virtual conference. So he made a passionate appeal to the world leaders, find that yes, you have already done something for, say, the third-tier nations, but as it is right now, even the second-tier nations also need these, because as it is, South Africa is already in recession. Yeah. Nigeria has joined. These are the two major powerhouses on this continent. We don't know who's coming up next. Some are already in recession, but they are still in denial. Many will come to agree and come out that fine, we need this. So he led the charge. Okay. But on paper, nobody agreed to it yet, which is a real problem. With that, that means African nations need to still continue servicing debts. And if they are doing that, recovery will take a longer period. So for the true recovery to happen, there has to be an agreement to suspend debt servicing for a period of time, probably like 2 or 3 years. So in that period of time, these nations need to get their acts together, wrap up their revenue base so that they will have a better lifeline. Okay. Until that is done, no relief.
So we'll see what happens to that, because since the coronavirus had come out and there was a lockdown across the continent, we've seen African leaders hammering on this issue of debt relief and debt forgiveness, because they know that their bottom line,
renegotiation also.
Exactly, debt renegotiation as well. We've seen it, and we don't know if the big takers will take, the World Banks, the IMFs, the Chinese loans coming in. We don't know who's going to bite. Let's move on to the next question now. We've seen the European Union and Britain engaging in direct trade negotiations with countries and even specific African regions. Now, what impact do you think these kind of counter around AfTA negotiations and trade barter deals could have on AfTA overall? We're talking about what is going to be the world's largest trading bloc, but then some people are still doing their individual negotiations.
Well, right now it's a game of survival across the globe. And principally, look at the European Union. The European Union is not as strong as it was before. Ireland is literally begging from what their GDP stands. And if you look at Greece, that has paid off its debts, they went through a turbulent time.
And that was a very painful period for Greece.
Now, the Italians also are managing to stay afloat. Now, with Brexit, a whole new negotiation has started. The United Kingdom has left the European Union, and with no deal. So now they need to ensure that they have more food supply. Trade is one thing. The major thing is, how do you drive your economy? Now, London was a haven where people take their money, but part of those mega banks are moving their funds, their headquarters, their resources out of the UK into to Paris, to Germany. So with that, European Union is trying to reinvent itself. So they are coming to Africa, trying to renegotiate some of their trade deals so that they can get what they don't have before, or what they don't have anymore. Now, with this, they want to get direct dealings. So the tariffs that they will pay will be reduced. We know that countries like Morocco, South Africa, Eswatini have direct access where they export their foodstuff to the European Union. And now even the UK has also come to Southern African Union.
So in all of this, it's not going to, the two can exist side by side. Individual trade and bilateral agreements and whatever it is and export deals and AfTA, they can exist side by side.
Definitely they can. But the unfortunate thing is, it is not to the benefit of Africa directly.
It will be to the benefits of those individual countries.
Exactly, those countries and those regions. Like Southern African Bloc, they had a holistic agreement with the United Kingdom where they can export beef, other agricultural products. Now, with this, they have, more lifeline. They can still trade within their African neighbors and also trade externally within Africa. So that is a win-win for them. But they're not the only ones who are doing this. Like a couple of weeks ago, Pacific Island nations and Southern Asian nations also signed a 17-man trade agreement without, for the first time, the U.S. So this is becoming the norm, because when you can renegotiate deals directly, the custom tariff which everybody relies on gets reduced, and there's no problem with this.
Okay, let's see. And of course, it gets to a point where it's almost like we are doing what's best for us, and we're doing what's best with us as well.
Exactly.
All right, one or two final questions. We'll be wrapping up this conversation. Now, are there any considerations for small and medium-scale business owners in terms of AfTA as well? Because many people are worried about them, not just the industries per se, but also those small businesses that are finding their footing on the continent. We're a continent of entrepreneurs, and that's very obvious. But what protection is there? What resources are there available for them with AfTA?
Well, right now there are many agreements going on that's been finalized as AfTA kicks off early next year. So, and one of the principal focus is to get financing to the small and medium scale industries. So yes, they are being considered, but they are a principal focus of these negotiations. So they will not be left out of it. Even, for instance, now something just happened some weeks ago in Kenya, where a market literally went online, an open store market. So things like that puts you in the forefront. I mean, to be alive and vibrant, you have to move with the times, as that market, as the Huru market.
Yeah.
So with that example, many other cooperatives can also follow suit, which would put them in the front and be easy to trade with across the continents.
Okay, we'll wrap this conversation up, and it's not definitely over. There are 10 weeks left before the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, Free Trade Area Agreement kicks off on January the 1st, 2021. It was delayed from a July 2020 kickoff. 30 countries have ratified and signed. And of course, out of all of the AU member countries, out of 55, it's only Eritrea that has not signed. So conversations on this will continue as we look at the 5 instruments involved and many more. Nasir, thank you as always for joining me.
Great to be here.
Okay, we'll be wrapping things up with NC4 to watch as promised, and we start on the eastern part of the continent, where Ethiopian Airlines has expanded their cargo operations into South Korea and the United States. The airline announced that its freight division, officially known as Ethiopian Cargo and Logistics Services, has launched a new trans-Pacific route. The carrier has added the trans-Pacific corridor between South Korea and the United States. Cocoa prices rise, leading to producers and processors clash. Now, tensions between cocoa producing countries and manufacturers over costs have led to soaring prices on the international market as demand slumps because of the coronavirus. In New York, the price of a ton of cocoa for delivery in December jumped by more than 25% since last Friday to $2,915. Let's move on from there. We go now to Nigeria, where Nigerian banks start charging customers for failed transactions on direct debit. Nigerian banks are set to start charging customers for failed transactions on direct debit. A direct debit is an authorization granted by the customer for a bank to draw payments from their account on regular due dates. The CBN instructed banks in December 2019 to start punishing customers for failed direct debit transactions caused by the customer's failure to fund their account. And finally, Ramaphosa lobbying for debt repayment suspension. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has lobbied G20 member states to persuade multilateral development banks to suspend debt repayments, further to help emerging countries resuscitate their economies. He was speaking at the virtual G20 Leaders Summit over the weekend and urged the G20 member states to use all of their persuasive powers to convince all creditor countries to address the problem of burgeoning and unsustainable developing country debt. And that's it on this edition of Business Edge. Thank you as always for joining us. Don't forget that you can be part of all of our conversations. Head to our website and you'll of course find more business and financial news, and follow us on all of our social media platforms. Until next time, I'm Tolulope, Adeleru-Balogun.